Today on the podcast, I got to interview Heather Carlson, a licensed marriage and family therapist based out of Boulder, Colorado, where she specializes in the delicate work of healing relationships. Beyond her private practice, she's a community builder and experienced women's group facilitator, leading retreats and mindfulness-based gatherings. You may also know her as the voice behind the blog, The Slow Weekender, where she writes about slowing down and living with intention. And after years of hearing women share their quiet ache for deeper friendship, Heather created The Invitation, a year-long program designed to help guide women into meaningful, intentional connection. I cannot tell you how many people I've talked to who have done a laundry list of diets and supplements, and they are still so confused about their health, dealing with chronic fatigue, chronic pain, and chronic symptoms still. At Nutrition with Confidence, we do not believe in quick fixes. We help you bio-individualize your diet and lifestyle recommendations and walk you through a step-by-step process that helps you to rebuild your body and calm your nervous system through it. This helps you regain control of your health and build confidence in your ability to heal. If you're interested in finally getting to the roots of your chronic symptoms, schedule a free exploration call at nutritionwithconfidence.com. Welcome, Heather. Thank you so much for being here today. I would love for you to tell us the story of what led you to research friendship and your background.
Well, lots of things. First and foremost, I am a marriage and family therapist. And so the study of relationships is like what my whole profession is based on. And so of course I do a lot of that kind of work daily in my clinical practice. But really honing in, not just of relationships of any kind, because I work with families and couples and individuals, but really focusing on friendship became really interesting to me during the pandemic in particular. No surprises. I was reading all the headlines like everyone else was. I was also feeling really disconnected, like most of us were. And it was actually post-pandemic, Natalie, when I realized that something had shifted in my own friendship landscape.
Wow.
So we were emerging from the pandemic. We were all coming out of our homes. Boulder was a really locked down community.
Yep.
The pandemic and isolation was taken very seriously. And so we had been really separated. I know in some communities in the country, people were still gathering. That was not happening here. And so I had been doing a lot of one-on-one, walking outside together. It was all in isolation, walking outside together, maybe a coffee date, 6 feet apart, all that kind of stuff, but just one-on-one. And I was tired. I was like feeling weary of like managing this one-on-one relationship and that one-on-one relationship and this one over here. And we weren't gathering. A lot of these women were close friends who didn't know one another. And I literally just woke up one day and was like, this is tiring.
Yeah.
Like managing all of these different relationships with these amazing women who don't know each other, who would probably like each other. So I did, before I started doing the research, I actually did something in my own life. And I sent out an email to 2 women that I knew pretty well and 2 women who were sort of more in the acquaintance category. One of them I actually call my driveway friend. And so Lizzie was a woman who I would drop my kid off at her kid's house and we would stand in her driveway and talk for like 45 minutes. But at this point, post-pandemic, I had never been inside her home. I had never seen her like one-on-one, but I really felt a connection with her. So again, 2 friends didn't really know, 2 friends I did know. And I was like, I'm going to send an email and invite the 4 of them to join me. This is such a big ask, but I did this. Join me in a year-long commitment for us to gather every month and take a chance and get to know each other. And there was one more ask. Can each of you bring one other woman into this circle of women?
Wow. Okay.
We were going to be a group of 10.
That's
I was
nice.
like, I don't know how to expand to this group other than just asking. So I
Mm-hmm.
sent that email out. The four of them all said yes. And then they all asked a couple of other women if they wanted to join this year-long commitment with a bunch of strangers. And a couple of women said no. And I really, to those four who, the original four, I was like, you know what? This is great news. This is women who are finding their yeses and nos. Understand,
Yes.
yeah, like understand what is too much or what is not the right time or the right fit or it's just
Mhm.
not right for them and they're exercising their voices. I was like, I love this. I was like, take their no graciously and carry on, find somebody else. So
Yeah.
we ended up with a group of 10. And so for a year, we met every month. And I mean, when those women first showed up at my doorstep, I only knew the four. I didn't know the other five. Like I shook
Mm.
their hands and welcomed them into my home, and we had I created we had like it was in the winter, it was in January, and we had a like homemade tomato soup and salad and a vision
Yeah.
boarding together
That's
and
perfect.
got to know each other. But once I started that initiative in my personal life, I just started reading everything I could get my hands on. I was like, what is happening? These because the women who
Mhm.
said yes were so eager and so ready and I kind of thought I was alone. I didn't really understand that this thing I was creating was really satiating something that everyone else was feeling also.
Mhm.
And and so I started doing that was what led me to the deep dive on the research. But really, I didn't do the research first and then leap.
Uh-huh.
I
Uh-huh.
left and then
Yeah.
did the research.
Yeah, which is, I think, often such a great way to, I mean, research is fabulous to spark things, but we want to research things to like kind of validate, like, why is this so important to us, you know? And it makes me sad that there's not more research, and funds into things that we really do need to make more findings in. And it's just, different diets even, or, that's the nutrition side of things. But I don't know about the landscape within psychology, even, but like certain things don't get enough researched that could really help us. But it starts with like how important like our own experiences, right?
Yeah,
So yeah,
yes. And that was the way that I did it. Exactly like you're
yeah, yeah. Well, then what did the research show? Was there, I mean, especially, are there any statistics that are out about technology's impact on us, the um, modern friendship, I guess, and what that looks like, especially between adults. I've
right.
definitely thought about this a lot in my 30s. Just, we're all adulting, and I've had some losses in friendships and changes, um, unspoken changes that are like, well, do I reach back out or what happened here? But just life starts to take us in different directions and had to question like what does friendship look like? And so help us here with
Yes,
some of that.
absolutely.
Mm,
And what I found in the research, just like to your earlier point, my life experience was validated in the data.
mm,
And that was
mm.
a very cool experience,
Yeah,
actually.
that's
That thing I was saying where I was like, I am feeling so fatigued with trying to manage all these they felt siloed, these important relationships to me.
mhm.
And that was probably the most validating and jarring piece of information that I found,
Yeah.
which is that the social really it's the social psychologists that are uncovering this data
Mhm.
and it when you hear it it just instantly makes sense but it's something that doesn't feel as often talked about to me. I don't know if it falls into that like sort of boring category of data but it's
Mhm.
impacting all of our lives so it doesn't feel boring to me. But what's happened is in pre-modern societies we had we had a lot less freedom to move around. So
Mhm.
the village, if you go way, way back in human existence, the village you were born into, and if you come into more modern times, the city, the town, the countryside, the borough in a major city, whatever it was,
Mhm.
that was where you stayed. And there were a lot of reasons for that. We didn't have religious choice. We couldn't move in our faiths if we were grounded in those. It was not acceptable to leave your family of origin. We could not move around within like racial lines or socioeconomic lines. Like all of those things were sort of laid out for you at birth, and you
Mhm.
didn't have a lot of freedom to change them. So the downside of that, of course, is oppression and segregation and all of these really bad things
Yeah.
that impacted our freedom. There was an upside to that way of being, though, societally, which is that we had very deep roots in the places where we lived. And this is the important piece. We saw the same people over and over and over again. We
Mm-hmm.
saw them at our place of worship. We saw them at our schools. We saw them at the local grocery store. We saw them at our civic or community based volunteer organization. We saw those people all the time. And what we know about what builds friendship is, no surprise, time together
Yeah.
and time together in shared activities. Well, if you're at the same spiritual gathering place, then you have that in common. If you're at the same volunteer organization, you have that in common, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there was all this crisscrossing of the way we interfaced with one another, and we built relationships through all that interaction.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing, that interaction was carried by the whole structure of the village, if you will.
Right.
It wasn't carried by the individual. And so fast forward to modern times, and now we have fractured social landscapes.
Yeah. Yeah, that
So
makes
now
sense.
we have more freedom. We can choose where we want to live. We can choose all of those other, elements that I named. And we do. But that means we're more like butterflies instead of like a tree with deep roots, right? We flit around, so we have
Mhm.
freedom, but it also fragments our relationships. And so you have a friend that's your coworker on your team at work, and then you have a neighbor, and then you have this person that you met at the gym, right? Well, none
Mhm.
of them know each other, and you don't have a way to overlap in the ways that you spend time with one another. And so what this is creating is an individual burden.
Mhm. Mhm.
And as soon as I read that individual burden, I was like, oh my gosh, yes, that is
Mhm.
exactly the reason that my instinct was to reach for a group
Yeah.
and have us really invest in time together. Like instinctually, I just knew that there was no other way
Right.
to create new, meaningful relationships if we didn't make a long term commitment and spend a lot of time together. And so I loved reading that data.
Mhm.
And that's information that I just don't hear sort of in all the social media, and there's a
Right.
lot of chatter around, loneliness epidemic and all of that, as there should be, but this piece feels missing for me. And what I
Mhm.
love about this too is that it it kind of lifts the burden. Like all of a sudden you're like, "Oh, it's not just me.
Mhm.
I'm up
Yeah.
against this challenge that is a societal, structural challenge,
Yeah.
not some individual deficit within me."
Yeah. I'm thinking as you're talking about this, just growing up and in college, moving from like high school to college, and then just the changes in my friendships and dynamics and self-confidence sometimes a different because like you said, like we weren't used to that. That became like a norm, but social
Mm.
anxiety is through the roof, right? And I want, there's so much at play with I remember in college learning about and I went from like a small town, living in a small town to living in like a much bigger city outside of I went to school in Azusa outside of like Pasadena, so bigger cities, just like conglomerate of lots of people. And I remember learning about this neurological effect that socially humans can only um they can only like hold on to like a certain amount of people's names or even just like make sense of like up to 500, I think, or I could
This
have
is
the
Robin
data.
Dunbar's work.
Okay,
Yes,
tell
you
me,
know
you know
exactly
the
who you're
data.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, but
Yes.
it helped me it made me feel a lot better because I struggled in college a little bit at the beginning because I was just like culture shock a little bit. And I went back into my shell because I didn't, there's just so many people. So, and I was like, well, what's wrong with me? But this is so validating to know that this is actually like a human experience. And this other research of just historically, we would have all been in our own little villages. We would have seen the same people all over and over and over again. And that consistency is what gives us connection and ground, like a lot of common ground to just interact socially with people. So that gives you, something to work towards for any social anxiety that people have is like, well, find the spaces. But I love what you just said of it's not just the individual burden of like, it's not up to you because that's another just pile that on. Like one more thing for us to do in our
Right.
modern world is like cultivate, group that, or like go find the spaces of like people that you want to interact with so yeah, you can do that. You can have still like your group of, workout buddies or your group of here. And yeah, it's still very fragmented there. So,
Right. And that fragmentation is again something that it is a challenge. It is a challenge that has solutions, but not if you don't understand the problem, right? I mean, this is sort
yes.
of like classic systems thinking.
Hmm.
I think a lot of times we are trying to solve the wrong problem.
Yes.
And this is a problem of lack of overlap and crisscrossing and exposure to the same people to build relationship. And so a lot of us are trying to solve the wrong problem.
Yeah.
And part of this problem is bigger than we can solve.
Hmm.
You are going to have a friend at work. You are going to have a friend who's your neighbor. Those things
Yeah.
that's not really going to change. But how you frame that in your mind certainly can change. Maybe you expect less of yourself in some of those relationships and decide to focus some of your energy into one particular area.
Yeah.
And you say, well, my neighbor is an acquaintance, but I'm not going to try to make my neighbor my best friend.
Hmm.
Or the person at work, you know what? We have a really great work relationship, and I appreciate them so much in that context. And I'm going to choose that when I have like a little bit of wounding or like they haven't invited me to do something outside of work, well, have I invited them to do something outside of work? And then we
Hmm.
can settle, maybe that relationship is just great where it is at work.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
can focus on, building a more robust connection village, if you want. That term is very popular right now with a different set of people, but I have this lovely connection at work. But you can see
Yeah.
how I'm reframing
Yes.
those relationships because I understand more clearly it's almost a ridiculous expectation of
Mhm.
ourselves when you have this framework of the fracturedness of our society
Yeah.
that we can have close friendships with all those people and maintain them all.
Yeah.
It's actually not possible.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
We have
No.
to do that research you were referencing, Robin
Mm-hmm.
Dunbar's work
Mm-hmm.
is really interesting because what his research has revealed, and it is respected, he's a renowned sort of friendship guru scientist. And what his research has revealed is that we have a very set number of people that we can maintain meaningful relationships with. And
Mm-hmm.
500, that number you mentioned, is sort of the outer limit of all of the people that we know.
Right. Okay. Yeah. That's mm-hmm.
150 is the number of people that if you the litmus test is if you had to go get a coffee with someone in that number of 150, that radius, you could sit down and you could have a meaningful conversation with them. You know them enough
Yeah.
and have enough history or connection with them, or at some point in your life you knew them well enough to have a
Mm-hmm.
meaningful conversation over coffee. The next
Mm-hmm.
circle has 50 people in it. And these are people that you see throughout the year. You may not see them every day, but you're going to see them throughout the year. And then it gets really small. We go to 15 people. That's probably your village.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
we have five, which is the innermost circle. Those are the people that we have true intimacy with. And that was fascinating to me because in that little tiny, that five, that bullseye of that sort of target, if you can imagine a target of friendship, like the different types of friendships in your life and relationships, that bullseye in the middle has five people for most of us. That includes a spouse or romantic partner, 1 to 2 family members, and then 2 to 3 friends. That's it. That's all we really can manage.
That that's affirming. That's all I feel like I can really manage. I go deep. I'm like, I need that intimacy. And so that's what I really ha- cultivate and crave. But it feels like it does in our society. It takes a lot. Do you think that's because, actually, is that because we're too damaged? Our nervous systems are too, disrupted and, um, like what's getting in the way of intimacy, I guess, even with those core relationships. What do you think?
I mean, the answer to that question feels like obviously it's quite complex, but what comes to mind based on the data that I have read and researched over the past few years is that it's more, this is actually a math problem. This is like,
Mm,
how many hours are there in a day?
mm,
How many obligations do we have?
yeah,
Our modern lives are built where we have commutes and we have a kid that maybe goes to one school across town and one that goes way over here. So they're not walking to school and they're not going to school with their neighborhood friends.
yeah,
So then their friends also live far away. And so just to see someone, we know that distance heavily impacts frequency of getting together with friends. That's a very well known and studied piece of data. It
yes.
actually is very clear.
Hmm.
People who live more than 5 miles away or a 30-minute drive are harder to maintain relationships with, not because you care about them less, but because that distance becomes a barrier.
Yeah, yeah.
And as soon as I heard that, I was like, well, yeah,
Hmm.
the person
It.
who lives 5 minutes away, yeah, I see them more often than the one who lives in 30 minutes is not that much time.
Hmm.
But it is
Hmm.
in a modern life
Yeah.
where our village is not this big, right? We have
Hmm.
villages that are expansive and we drive all over the place and we have jobs that are far away from where our homes are. And
Yeah. Yeah.
we're back to the fractured thing. So
Yes.
how come intimacy is hard is because I think the infrastructure of modern life,
Hmm.
and B, the infrastructure creates stress for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
The juggling creates stress. And so then sometimes we get home, and even if it's the friend who lives 10 minutes away, there are a lot of people who feel too depleted, to your point,
Hmm.
to engage.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I love that you are focused so much on the system because it helps externalize, like people can take things so yeah, obviously we all have, our own internal systems that interplay like you're saying, like we get home from work, we might not feel there's other things that we have to deal with on our own, but so much of that can be dealt. I think we think we have to like show up perfectly or whatnot in relationships and I think people are afraid to be in the group, right? To be messy in the group and to have the messiness of the group, right? We've also chosen to have more calm and convenience, but at the cost of connection in a lot of ways. But when we can externalize, it's like this isn't about you. This is a bigger issue that's impacting you. And it can help you make that step to say, okay, this is actually if I can change the structure a little bit, then things can follow, like the connection and intimacy can follow. So not focusing so much on like, oh, I have to work on my internal system of, self, giving myself grace and showing up, just thinking, okay, like if I can just change my environment, the rest will follow with the goals that you want with when it comes to connection with people and getting rid of that loneliness. Um, yeah, how else would you say modern loneliness exists differently than like previous generations? Was loneliness a thing before now, or like when did this really start for some
Right?
of
That's such a great question. And I'll tell you what, who has the best answer for this question is if your listeners or viewers want to watch the documentary Join or Die,
you?
which is about Robert Putnam's, it's based on the work and the life of Robert Putnam,
Mm-hmm.
who is a political science researcher and professor actually at Harvard University. And he was very interested in loneliness before we were really coding it as loneliness. That's a term that's really been used in the past decade or so. He started his research in the 80s. And I'm going to try to be succinct with this because his book that he wrote, Bowling Alone, is like this thick. So let me try to be succinct. The answer to that question is that it is different now. People did not experience loneliness to this degree before.
Wow.
And this is very clear, especially through Robert Putnam's work. And one of the reasons we're back to the social structures, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
all roads lead to Rome here. It's like everything just kind of goes back to the
Mm-hmm.
same shift, right? This change has created a tidal wave of impacts in the lives of humans. This societal shift in the way we don't live in these smaller communities anymore. And so what Robert Putnam's research really points to is that it was really about in mid 60s. In fact, some of his research will even say in 1964 was the year this all changed.
Mm.
But one of the things that he tracked was that participation in civic clubs, community-based clubs, social and charitable clubs. This would be like in Boulder, Colorado, where I live, there's the Elks Club,
Yes.
and it has a
Yes.
pool and it has an old fashioned, it's like very old school,
Mm-hmm.
a community club, and it was only for men back in the day,
Mm-hmm.
and men joined because they had a spiritual affiliation that was the same. That was one of the requirements, interestingly,
Mm.
and they all had an interest in some kind of charitable contribution to their community, and so they met all the time, but it was a social and a charitable based organization,
Um,
and those were wildly popular up through the mid 60s and early 70s.
yeah.
And those started to decline, according to Robert Putnam's research, around the same time that we also started to see a huge decline in religious organization affiliation.
Oh,
So
interesting.
those two things were very much aligned. Of course, we have the introduction of the suburb, right? Like when you start looking, women went back to work. When you start looking at all of the social dynamics that went into this change, you can really track it, but it is trackable to that time,
Yeah. Okay. So
which I
in
think
the
is
60s,
fascinating.
fast.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, can you share some more about the different societal shifts, like details there, especially about, I guess, was it technology in the 60s? Like what, um, yeah, women went back to work, you said, like, so now we have dual income, homes, like focus.
I never read any research on this, but just with my own background as a relational therapist and an attachment therapist, and all of the research and study I've done in sort of in human development and in family systems work, my systems thinking brain goes to thinking that when women went back to work, I could easily follow the idea that women are often, I mean, this is known, that women are often the social caretakers
Mm-hmm.
societally. And so that often means if you look at like a heterosexual marriage, the woman is often the one who is maintaining and developing
Mm-hmm.
the social relationships. So of
Mm-hmm.
course, when women go back to work, they have less time to do that. I
Yeah.
mean, you can just track that, right? That makes sense. They
Yeah.
have more on their plate and they're less able to do that at the volume that
Mm-hmm.
they were before. And so there's really this is I love nerding out on this stuff. There
Mm.
is fascinating data that again Robert Putnam was able to access where there were companies like paper napkin companies or plastic tablecloth makers like
Yeah.
companies that made products like that would track, of course, sales for their products. And as they saw them declining in the 60s and 70s, they would put out public surveys asking people, how often do you go picnicking? How often do you use our product for your family dinners?
Yeah.
So there's all this data talking about how often we used to do those things during those decades compared to now. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but they're jaw dropping. It's like I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna make this up just for the sake of our conversation, but if it was like the average person went on 7 picnics a year in 1960, they now go on 1.
Wow.
It's
That's,
like it's this
yeah.
drastic drop. It's not like a 50%. It's like this drastic drop in
Mm.
all of these things. How often do you eat a meal in someone else's house? How often do you have others over into your own home to entertain them?
Right.
How often do you go out with another family or couple for dinner? These are things that are trackable,
Mhm.
and the numbers are just decline, decline, decline over
Yeah.
decades.
Wow. It is. We had friends over the other day. We love having friends over for dinner and cooking for them. But they were like, I can't remember the last time we had dinner with friends, like at someone's house. Just with, like, not even just going. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot more of going out to eat. Nutritionally, I like the food I eat or make
Right, of course.
more better than some of the restaurant kinds of options that we've got. But yeah, it's shocking how few of those experiences we focus like our attention I feel like is pulled in all these other directions, and there's so much, like you said, the expectations, um especially definitely on women to also be bringing in being productive financially, but also productive socially and like curating because like women have that skill set. Um, can you talk about that a little bit? What the science says about how or why women it's not, is there biologically reasons that women hold this skill to be more socially connected than men or
Oh, I
curating
don't
that?
know. That's such a great question. I don't know about the science that it comes from a purely like biological
Mm-hmm.
perspective,
Mm-hmm.
but certainly throughout history, it is trackable that women have been the caretakers and nurturers
Yeah.
of, again, it's relationships. And you're like, well, what is a relationship made of?
Mm.
A relationship, an intimate personal relationship with another human, is built on emotional connection and safety.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that men have for a very long time not been given permission
Mm-hmm.
to express themselves vulnerably, to express themselves with a lot of emotional variance.
Yeah.
And so it just tracks that throughout history, women have had permission and been expected to
Yeah.
carry the emotional caretaking roles.
Mm-hmm.
And by default,
Mm-hmm.
that has stuck around, which is so fascinating to me because I think obviously there have been monumental changes in women's rights, how women are viewed societally and valued. But this is one of the things that has not changed as much as you would think. Women continue to be around the world, not just in
Yeah.
North American cultures, the caretakers of their emotional systems.
Mm.
And so it
Interesting.
is it is a lot of weight
Yeah. On
on
women.
one. Yeah, I
Yes.
always say, I'm like, who refills the coffee at your office? Or, when I'm working with
Mm.
heterosexual couples, I'll say, who sends out the Christmas cards? Who
Mm.
makes sure that all of the grandparents get a birthday gift?
Mm-hmm.
And not always, but it is quite common for the woman to be the caretaker of those kinds of emotional reaches and nurturing and caregiving reaches to contribute to building relationships.
Yes, yes. I think the reason why I asked if you knew of any research biologically is because, I mean, I was definitely, I think the conversation of these roles for women and men need, has evolved for me of like in college, was the fiery kind of feminist, rejecting like that kind of pressure from society to like step into that kind of role because I wanted a choice, right? But over the years, I've realized that there are differences biologically between men and women, mostly hormonally. I think there's probably a lot of hormonal influence here with especially when we know progesterone can rise when like a group of women get together. And it's like very good for our hormones to have women gathering. I love reading the mythological, like the folklore and myths of Celtic and stories from like Clarissa Pinkola Estes, women who run with the wolves, and these are just these common and then Sharon, I think it's Blackie, I forget Shannon Blackie or Sharon Blackie. She wrote If Women Rose Rooted, and she talks about the Celtic different stories there, and it's something about the web of connection that women have it's very to like not only each other, but there's to nature, and it's like I
Mhm.
think there's so much complexity about um, and there's probably biological reason for that maybe, but um, and it's not, it doesn't necessitate that every woman has to do that. Definitely men have emotions too. And so like there's just like a definite conversation here to hold respect for this role that women can, partake in and also not feel so burdened by it. I think so many women just feel so burdened by this, like we're the only ones here and like, come on, do we have to be the only ones? I don't know. So, any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of women feel the burden of that responsibility, especially women who are responsible for, if they're caretaking others, if they have parents,
Hmm.
elderly parents they're taking care of, if they have children and families. Um, but also if I often say it goes beyond the structures of family. I think that women show up as the caretakers in burden, like I said, who fills the coffee pot at their
Yes.
office, right? Like we do not like, this is not Mad Men, right? This is not 1950. We do not want women relegated to these roles. But
Hmm.
even that term relegated sort of expresses that they don't want it, right?
Right,
But
right.
you're sort of suggesting is there is this innate part of us that has this ability and capacity to nurture, right? But we do
Yes.
want choice in whether or not we do it. What
Yes.
I think of when I hear you expressing it that way is that I think everything you said is accurate, that women do feel the burden of maintaining so many emotional relationships in their lives. And we haven't really added them onto the list. They
Mm.
also are responsible for caretaking themselves, right?
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
isn't someone else to do that because
Hmm.
they are the caretakers of so many others.
Yeah.
And that is one of the other things that I hear so often from women in my work. Now that I'm focused so much on friendship, I'm of course drawing a lot of, you know, people are finding me in my clinical work, and working with more and more people who are struggling with social isolation.
Yeah.
And they're like, I am tired, I carry so much already, and now I'm looking around and I don't have the friends that I thought I would have at this stage in my life. And they can be
Mm.
20, they can be 30, 4. I mean, I have
Wow.
70-year-olds who are coming into my office saying, I never thought in a million years that I would be in a place where I would look around and think, I don't have the social connections that I once had.
Wow.
And that,
That
of course, that just adds to the burden.
exactly. Exactly. So tell us a little bit more about some of the science of the health impacts then of that social isolation for it in all aspects of our life. It's happening, right? So or areas of age groups. Yeah.
Right. Loneliness is a topic that is very, it's so dynamic because most clients don't walk in the door and sit down and say, I'm lonely. What
Hmm.
is interesting to me is that what they often will say, uh, we call that the presenting problem in the therapy room. The
Yeah.
presenting problem is often, I am depressed, I'm sad.
Mm.
And that, when clinicians hear I'm depressed and I'm sad, or parents, or any of your listeners, if they have a friend, if they have a cousin, whomever it is in their life, if you have someone in your life who is repeatedly telling you they're depressed, they're sad, they're really anxious, they're overwhelmed, I think one of the questions that we should begin asking everyone is, how lonely do you feel?
Hmm. Yes. Yeah.
Because loneliness is often the root of depression and overwhelm and anxiety. It
Right.
eventually morphs, and when it has persisted for long enough,
Hmm.
it doesn't surprise anyone, I'm sure, to
No.
hear that eventually it leads to the symptoms that come with depression and anxiety and overwhelm.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, it's I feel, do you feel like in the mental health world, is there too much focus on these because is there a diagnostic, DMS-5, like I don't know if that's the term, yeah, if that's can you be diagnosed with loneliness? Like, is that even in there?
Right. Okay, I
Probably
don't think
not,
so.
but it should.
I'm sitting here going, rattling through my brain through all my diagnosis classes from
I
years ago,
know.
but I don't believe so. Of
Yeah.
course, loneliness is one of the emotional experience, as one of the states that people will name
Yeah.
when
But
they're
it's
talking about depression, when they're talking about anxiety or overwhelm. They
wow.
will mention loneliness. But
Hmm.
often what I'm suggesting is that, in my experience, loneliness is often at the root of
Yeah.
those other presenting problems.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
what you miss if you're not asking about loneliness, I mean, most solid clinicians are going to do a full evaluation. They're going to ask you, like, who are your closest friends? Who can you confide in? Who do you trust? Who can you call at 2 o'clock in the morning if
Yeah.
you got to take your dog to the vet and you need someone to go with you, or if you've had a true emergency and you need somebody to come to the hospital, or whatever it is? Who are
Mm.
the people that you can call? And they will answer the phone and they will be there. And you
Mhm.
will often find that those people, and it is, I mean, even just Natalie saying it to you right now, this is the experience I always have with my clients when they say this to me in my therapy
Mm.
room. When they say no, I mean, like, I feel my heart fluttering right now. It is literally heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
we are just not designed. You're talking about biology. We are not designed to do this alone. We don't do well. We don't thrive. We are
Yeah.
not happy. We don't grow. It's just not being alone as a human is extraordinarily detrimental.
Yes. You just said those words like being alone. Is that different? Is that different at all from loneliness, or is that what people would say? I feel alone in that experience of loneliness.
Mhm. Alone and loneliness are very different.
Mm.
Yes, they're quite different. We can
Hmm.
feel alone in an endeavor, which often can feel scary.
Hmm. Yeah.
Uh, but alone does not indicate that there isn't anyone to help. You know, we
Mm-hmm.
can be alone and have friends and have social
Mm.
connections and have that safety net and be a part of a village, but we can be alone in a certain type of experience, and whether it's emotional or tangible experience. But loneliness is a feeling of not having anyone, right?
Mm.
That is, there isn't anyone to be with me. There, it's that ache, right? Alone, I often associate with a feeling more of fear.
Yeah.
When I think of the human, sort of the biology again of the human experience and how we're hardwired, loneliness is sad.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I love that you just described that. That really clears things up for me. And um, I think about um, I, I'm gonna butcher his name, but he wrote a lot about existential therapy.
Irvin Yalom.
Yalom, yes. I loved his analogy of just like the um the truth that we all are in this human experience alone to some degree. Like we're all in our own little boats, and the other humans around us, we can see them out in their little boats. But their boat experience and the waves that they're experiencing, like nobody, we can only grasp. I love his language there. It was like we're just grasping at the other people's full experience, but so that's fine. And at the same time, like we can still be together, right? And that's different than just being lonely and there's nobody, you don't even see anybody out there. You're like in your own boat and it
No
just
other
feels
boats.
no other boats. They're whatever, they're clouded or yeah, they're literally not there. So that's a very different experience, imagery, I guess, to think of. Well, with here, I guess if you had to summarize kind of these core challenges that we spent a lot of time just focusing on what's kind of going wrong
Right.
here in our modern friendship, but if you could summarize that into 3 words, what would they be? The
About
main,
what's going wrong or
yeah,
what.
the core challenges of that we're facing in our modern friendships.
We have issues with this fractured state of our
Mm.
societal structure.
Mhm.
We do not have enough regularity in the way that we see one another, and we're also lacking intentionality in the way that we gather.
Mm.
And that last one we haven't really spoken about, but the intentionality is one of the pieces that was woven into that pre-modern structure of sort of village life, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, we were seeing people in organized places at the place of worship in this club or organization that we were all a member of, right? So out in the field even, right? All doing gardening and harvesting our food together. We knew why we were all there.
Yeah.
And now what's happening is that we lack intentionality when we see each other. So if you happen to see someone because they're at your kid's soccer game,
Yeah.
you don't have necessarily a shared value system, which is one of the things that we know creates the feeling of belonging and bonding, right?
Mm.
You don't know if there's a spark of chemistry even. You may feel that, but you
Hmm.
really need to feel that outside of that context to be able to make sure that it is true, right? And
Yes.
so once the soccer game season, like when soccer season ends and you no longer see that person, right? There was no intentionality in that hanging out time together. It was convenience.
Right. Yeah.
And so a lot of our modern relationships now are based on convenience. So it's the work,
Mhm.
this is where we go back to the work friend example or the neighbor friend example. And so the context that holds those relationships together is very situational.
Hmm.
And once that context goes away, those relationships often don't continue
Mm.
because the glue was not actually shared interests, shared beliefs, shared values, those things that we know build belonging. It was convenience.
Yeah. So, I think you talk about like naming the desire for connection as a tool or like a way to be intentional. Like I remember listening to uh speaker who talks about like getting past social anxiety and things like that on one of these podcasts I was listening to. And she said one of the best things to do is just tell people how much you like them, just like the more you say that you like somebody, like this like creates this, it opens the invitation, right? Like you're starting to create more intention there of like, oh yeah, I'd really like to get to know you more. Like I think you're really cool.
Right.
Just something simple like that. Even which we rarely say, like compliments or what we really like about people. So, how does naming, yeah, that desire for connection change the relational dynamic? Can you tell us more examples of how to be more intentional?
Well, what you just named is giving someone a clear signal.
Yeah.
In attachment therapy, which is the kind of therapy the model I work within,
Mm.
which is the study of like attachment is the study of relationship dynamics. And so what's really healthy and helps us navigate relationships more easily is when we get a clear signal from someone else.
Yes.
And so that is very clear. I like
Hmm.
you. It's
Yes.
very hard to misinterpret that, right?
I know. I feel like so much of some, interactions I feel like now are like there's not a lot of clarity of like, people are in their heads and like just not really sure. But yeah, being really clear, just very direct it doesn't hurt. But like why are we so afraid to do that? Do you find that there's some common fears that women have about being that one to initiate like I like you and want to be your friend. I have a friend crush on you or something like
Mhm.
that.
I mean, we are just inherently risk adverse, right? That is part of the human condition. And you mentioned technology at the top of our conversation, and we haven't revisited that. But this is
Mm,
where I do think that talking about the way that our digital lives are starting to impact our social lives, this is where that really fits in. And Sherry Turkle, who is a researcher at MIT and has been doing research about the intersection of human development and technology, which
yeah,
to me is like beyond fascinating. That's really what
absolutely.
I love too. She has contributed greatly to the body of work that explains why risk taking now has gotten so challenging.
Hmm.
Part of it is because in all of this asynchronous interaction we have, which, Facebook or Instagram or even just texting, right? We're not in a live conversation with one another. You're texting me
Right.
in 2 days, 5 minutes, or never, I'm texting back, right? So
Yeah.
what she proposes in her studies, Sherry Turkle, is that is giving us this opportunity for dress rehearsals in
Mm,
how we respond. So
mm,
we are experiencing less and less spontaneity of
wow.
relational interaction.
Wow. So that's interesting because so spontaneity is a necessity for our relationships, but like it's so hard to just rely on spontaneity to like get together even. So yeah, it's an essential thing, but we kind of have to have that structure and intentionality or container basically to allow for that to happen. It's just not with our society in the way that things are structured now.
Mhm. Right. Well, risk tolerance is built by exposure. So the
Mm-hmm.
more you do something that feels scary or risky to you, the
Mm.
less scary and risky it feels over time generally, right?
Yeah,
And so
definitely.
what that research I was just referencing is really validating is that as we take less and less social risks because we have asynchronous interactions where somebody
Yes.
can say something to you and if it stings or you don't quite know how to respond, you can wait and you
Mm.
can find your footing and you can send a text and then delete it and then send another one and practice, right?
Mm.
So that process though it I mean, you can argue both sides, but though it will give us an opportunity perhaps to respond in the quote unquote right way,
Right.
what it cheats us of is the experience of saying something we regret in that moment and then having to deal with that. Well, that's going
Mhm.
to build a lot of emotional skills, right?
Yeah,
We're,
absolutely.
we're missing out on practice about
Mm-hmm.
how to take chances with one another
Mm.
and
Yeah.
so that social the digital part that you were mentioning early is having a great impact, like a huge impact on
Yeah.
how we interact with one another and the risks that we're willing to take with one another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So let's talk about the other three pill or like so that's intentionality is one of those three pillars that you talk about.
Mhm.
And is and then proximity and regularity are the others. So these are pillars that are essential for friendships and relationships in general, right? So but that let's talk about proximity then. Speaking of technology, is it possible to have, a good relationship with someone who's halfway across, is it possible to do that with the digital connection and or like how important is it to have the physical proximity versus digital?
I'm going to give you one of those like interviewee answers that you may not like, but what what the
I'll
answer to
dig
that
in.
question? Yeah. So I think it depends on where you are in
Mm,
those numbers of 5, 15, 50, or 150. I think it's what type of relationship you're hanging out in
mm.
that is
Yes.
the answer to that question. So if you have um, a college best friend, or for me, I actually met my very closest and most long-standing friendship. She and I met when we were 6 years old in second grade. And we still have a relationship, and I'm going to be 50 this year.
Wow.
And our relationship is beautiful and healthy. We do not talk all the time.
Mm,
We talk infrequently. She lives in Canada. I live in the United States. So there are proximity is we are like nowhere near close to each other. But we are able to maintain a really vital friendship
mhm,
through occasional phone calls. I'm a good big letter writer. I love that
mm,
way of maintaining friendships that doesn't take a lot of time. It's actually shorter to write a letter than it is to be on a phone call with someone. And
mhm.
it's a lovely touch point. So she and
Yeah.
I are able to maintain a really lovely relationship, but she's not the person I'm going to call at 3 o'clock in the morning in an emergency because she doesn't live here.
Right.
And so my argument with because I get this question a lot from clients and from people who
Mhm.
are participating in the invitation, which is the friendship program that I have. Can we do this with people who live out of state? And I
Yeah.
say you can. However, what we know is that the friendships that are going to be that are going to have you feeling the most grounded, when people tell me they're lonely, it's not because they don't have a college friend that they don't talk to
Mhm.
anymore. It's not because they don't have a kid they went to kindergarten with that they don't talk to anymore.
Yeah.
It's because they live in a town where they don't have people to call at 3 o'clock in the morning, or they on a Saturday morning when they wake up and want to go to coffee suddenly, they don't have anyone to call.
Yeah.
So a lot of us have friendships that are in those outer categories simply because they just don't live close anymore. So
Mhm.
they're meaningful friendships, but they're just not as frequent. We don't see
Yeah.
them as frequently.
Mhm.
But what is really important is to not feel lonely, is to have a smaller number of people who live where you live, whose
Mm.
home you can go into and share a meal or a cup
Yeah.
of coffee or a talk on their couch and vice versa. And
Yeah.
I knew that intrinsically, that's one of those things, Natalie, that I just felt was true when I organized my group of friends post-pandemic, we decided not to go into restaurants, believe it or not, even though we could finally, but we were like, let's gather in each other's homes. No one's been able to go in each other's homes for so long.
Yes.
That felt critical to me because I was like, I don't think I can have a village if I don't have never been in your home.
Yeah.
Like, I need to know what your pet's name is, and I need to like meet your partner and your kids, and
Yes. Yeah.
I need to know what your decorating style is. Like, not knowing, not having been in your home
Yeah.
put some kind of emotional distance for me between myself and someone.
It's
And so
true.
that just felt intrinsic for me. And then lo and behold, I'm reading Robin Dunbar's work, and he says it explicitly
Wow.
that one of the ingredients that they can absolutely track and make sense of in the data is that people who have spent time in one another's homes have a higher quality of relationship.
That makes so much sense to me because when I think back to some of my times that I felt the most connected, they were when I had roommates and, multiple roommates, not just one. It was like a house in college and then like after college even. Um, and that's one of the things I really miss about like communal living and think is so great about communal living. And yet it's not the norm, past a certain, different life stage or some sort. But, obviously there are communities who are intentional and are choosing to do that and ways to do that. And so that's another way I think we can change the landscape of our modern existence here and push against the societal norms. But that's powerful. That is amazing to know, the people we lived with or have been in their homes too. Like it doesn't have to be like, yeah, roommates, but even just
Right.
living in a little pod or like it's interesting that like suburbs were starting right in the 60s, but
50s, yeah, post-war,
50s, yeah.
post-World War II.
Hmm. And that
We're really
seems,
taking off in the decades that followed.
yeah. And my husband definitely had that suburb kind of experience growing up and does have a lot of memories of just like connection there, but a lot of it was lacking just in the connection to nature. And he realized that was a huge piece that also it was just like fabricated and disconnected. He couldn't remember like the time he just actually had his feet in soil, So, but it's not always that, neighborhoods all connected or would have it became less and less, obviously, since then that communities and suburbs would have the neighborhood potluck or something like that. Interesting. So
Right.
interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah, is that in people moving away more? Talk about like the mobility aspect too of like for women who have moved or feel isolated geographically because of, why they're moving and not just women, anyone. Moving's probably like the most stressful thing I think we can do, right? Because of this, it just really up uproots us from all of the people that are core supports. So how can proximity be rebuilt intentionally for those people? Like what can be helpful there?
Yeah, there's move well to your point, we move now more than we used to.
Hmm.
And there's to me it's like a paradox within a paradox because now we move more than we used to,
Yes.
and we are more isolated in the new places that we move to than we used to because let's just go back 100 years. If you had moved from one farming community to another, you would have dropped into another community where your presence would have been very known because you would be the new person in a
Hmm.
small community, and people would have welcomed you over.
Yeah.
They would have come to you and welcomed you, and there was
Hmm.
a very different way of engaging with new people.
Mm.
And now we're just so fractured that you can move into a neighborhood and not have a single neighbor come over and greet you.
Yeah. Andy
We're
and I
just so
make a point.
siloed.
Yeah, we try to make a point to do that. Even when actually instead of instead of other people greeting us and welcoming us, we make cookies, healthy cookies for people that are our neighbors and we go, "Hi, we're the new neighbors." So, it's always, yeah, that's a different way to go about it. But that makes so much sense. Is like even now, especially because, a lot of communities wouldn't even notice a new person moving in. So,
So Natalie, it does not matter which researcher I am following, whether they're an anthropologist, a social scientist, a psychologist, whomever they are. I will tell you one thing that everyone says that is applicable to our modern world. This is what we have to do now.
mhm.
If you are moving to a new place, you are going to have to insert yourself. You are going to have to make almost 100% of the effort to
Mhm.
find new friendships and maybe new communities. I mean, a whole new community is a little bit harder to find, but new friendships because people are siloed. We've already talked about people are overwhelmed, they are busy,
Yeah.
and a lot of them may already have an established group and they don't have capacity or they don't feel like they have capacity for new friends.
Yeah.
And so it is really dependent upon the individual to show up to things, to try new things, go to an art class, go to the new climbing gym, like whatever your thing is,
Yes.
to show up in those places and introduce yourself, talk to people.
Mhm.
Trying to find, I have a great reference for a researcher who has contributed really beautifully to this work. And it's about Janice McCabe, that's her name, the open friendship markets. She's
Mhm.
contributed to this concept and is another researcher at Dartmouth College. And her research is to this exact point. When we are the new kid on the block, and we should go, we say, actually, I'll give you a live example from a
Okay.
woman who showed up to one of my women's circles, not a client of mine, but someone from the community who showed up. She just moved to Boulder and she came to one of my women's circles to try to meet some people and have a community, female based experience. And I was chatting with her after the women's circle and I asked her what else she was doing to try to meet people. And she said, well, I joined a pottery class and I was really hoping to meet some people there. Everyone had in their earbuds and was
Oh,
listening
yeah.
to music or podcasts. And I was like, oh, I mean, I just felt like my whole heart sank when she
Yeah.
said that to me.
Yeah.
So that is what researcher Janice McCabe would call a closed friendship market. The people who are in that pottery class are not there to make friends.
Yeah.
Though that particular pottery class, those people are there to get in there
Their
their
art.
zone.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Their
be
art
creative and
expression.
have
Yeah.
their own. This is well, they're alone. They're actually there to be alone. Interestingly,
Yeah. Wow.
going back to your alone versus lonely, this is an example of they're there to be alone,
That's
and
great.
and so that was not an open friendship market. So it's not only do you have to show up to places, but you're going to show up and then you're going to assess who is the person in this room who seems like they are in an open market. They are also looking for connection.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's so good. I chose to live in this small town that we live in, Jacksonville, Oregon, because it's very walkable. And
Mm,
I've always thought of, the in systems thinking. It's kind of like, okay, it's less about like, well, there's a component of like just creating the life you want to live and creating opportunities to interact with more people. So there's just a lot of people who walk around. So I feel filled up sometimes just I mean, I've made friends just because we all have the same walking route in a way, or we interact on this morning and they're not, yeah, it's just really great connection that grounds you. And it was those, you can tell when some people are open and when people aren't, even in that. But I just want to share that as an example too. It's just like, doesn't even have to be as hard as, signing up for a class and like scoping it out. Like sometimes that can be maybe a little daunting.
mhm.
But just going on, what is your normal, what do you want to do in your normal day to day? How can you brush shoulders with the same kinds of different people in your community? And not every town is very walkable. I do understand that, but yeah,
Right.
yeah, sometimes you can pull from that experience and fit it into your own life too. And that actually brings us to the regularity pillar. So, why is regularity so essential to friendship from a research? We've kind of already talked about that, but you can get into anything else that you want to share about that.
Yeah, I think what I'd like to share about this piece is that there are some just hard and fast numbers that are, I think, when I share these with groups of women in town during my community events, there's usually like that sort of like that pause of whoa and oh my gosh, that feels a little intimidating.
Hmm.
It's sort of like a hesitant pause in the room. So Jeffrey Hall is the researcher who is credited with coming up with these numbers. So I always share these statistics that come from his research, and he's at the University of Kansas. So in a 2018 study, so pretty recent, his study showed that to take an acquaintance to a casual friend requires 50 hours.
Wow.
So an acquaintance to a casual friend. A casual friend to a friend, 90 hours of time together, and friend to close friend or best friend, which I kind of like to put in quotations because we're adults. And I'm like, do adults really have best friends? That's a whole nother topic of conversation. But friend to close friend is 200 hours.
That's a lot of hours.
It's just so much time. And so when you go back and you think of when people say, gosh, in high school, it was easy for me, or in college, it was easy for me, or when I went to summer camp that time, and I'm thinking, well, right, because you
Yeah.
were sitting beside the same kid at class every day for an hour, and then you had lunch with them, and then maybe you guys were on the same sports team too. I mean, like the hours just added up so much more easily in those contained environments. And as adults, we don't have those.
Mm.
And what's really, I think, is an interesting piece that is essential to throw into this conversation about the number of hours it takes to build, meaningful friendships is that in this study, they actually accounted for work relationships, which I think is really
Mm.
important because
Mhm.
you could have some big project and you're spending literally, I mean, hours upon hours every week with the same people.
Right.
Those do not contribute to those numbers I just shared with you in the
Oh.
studies because those are not relational. They're not, you're not talking about your personal lives, your beliefs, your values, your preferences,
Mm.
your idiosyncrasies, maybe you're not showing up in the same way.
Mm.
So, those hours, those work relationships that don't cross the boundary of the work environment
Mm.
are not considered in these numbers, which I think is something to
Yeah.
make clear.
Yeah, definitely. I'm also thinking of just the spike of so many different retreats and, experiences that you can go and, pay for. And yeah, you go through this whole thing with this whole transformational experience and journey with a group of people. And then poof, like you go. I mean, sometimes there's amazing relationships that can come from that. But I want, it just makes me think of like even those experiences can't replace the consistency that of our just the time like showing up um when life gets messy and getting hard like at times it's just the quick even like check-in text even though you can't get together. I do think builds the local proximity client people that you friends that you are also seeing, but there are seasons that I feel like they get, life's just getting busy. But yeah, so I guess why, um, yeah, I have questions about like this whole program that you have, the friendship program, the invitation is what
Mhm,
it's called.
mhm.
And so can you share a little bit about that and like why this is such a helpful container that could help so many people with cultivating better friendships?
Right. Yeah, the invitation feels like both a professional thing that I've created and it feels so deeply personal. What
Mm,
I tell people a lot is I'm like, my heart is in that program. It is,
mm,
yes, it is a professional offering, but my heart is really in there. And it is a smash up of my professional experiences and that the program that, or the friendship group that I started at the beginning of the pandemic. It's sort of a melding between all my professional and clinical experience and knowledge, working in relationships with people, and what I did in my personal life. And of course, all these foundational pieces and elements that are so clear that help build healthy and thriving relationships. So the invitation came to me, the idea of it came to me actually before I started my friendship group. I
Mm.
was like, there has to be a way for us to come out of this pandemic and like come back together. But
Yes.
I just couldn't get the mechanics of it to fit.
Hmm.
So I actually abandoned trying to create anything big. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to just do this for myself. I can't figure
Hmm.
out the logistics of this thing. So I'm just going to create my own friendship group.
Hmm.
And that's what I did. So obviously that was the beginning of this program.
Mm.
But what became so clear to me is that there is a recipe despite these infrastructure problems that create these challenges for us in modern life.
Hmm.
There is a way to find meaningful friendship. And
Mm.
again, I'm going to base this program on all of those pillars that we've talked about, right?
Yeah.
Regularity, intentionality. We didn't talk about this, but group commitment is one of the
Hmm.
things that I've infused into that program.
Yeah. Well, actually, that was a question. I was trying to find it. I'm like, where did I put it? Is why is the year-long container important? Like, and you made that very clear in your small group kind of pilot program thing.
Right.
Um, we wouldn't call it that. It was just for you. But yeah, that they had to commit for a year,
Mhm.
and that kind of ties into that regularity and consistency
Mhm.
building that consistent contact. You can't, like, why is that so important to also the nervous system and building trust and relationships? Yeah. And yeah, talk about that commitment.
Right. I mean, well, as soon as I came across, Jeffrey Hall's numbers, and I'm like, 200 hours to develop a close friendship. I was like, what? 200 hours? I've got 3 kids. I run a full-time practice. I run retreats and women's groups, and I write
Mhm.
content. I'm also a writer. I was like, oh my gosh, how in the heck do I create 200 hours of time with more than one person?
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing. This is for one
One
relationship,
person.
right? I was like, "Oh my gosh, the math is getting really challenging here." And remember, that was sort of my pain, was like, I am
Mm.
not able to maintain all of these siloed friendships the way I want to, with the intentionality that I want to show up with the
Mm.
attention that I want to give my friends. I'm just not able to do it in the way that I want to. And I kept thinking, Natalie, I mean, literally, I would lay in bed at the end of the pandemic and I was like, if my friends just knew each other, they would like each other so much. And guess what? They do.
That's
I
awesome.
know that's not always going to happen, but it actually, there is a little bit of research on that. And that is one strategy that some of the folks out there who are also trying to help solve this problem, they do actually suggest, like I do, if you have a close friend and you're recognizing that there just isn't, you don't have the safety net and you don't have the connections that you're really longing for. If
Mm.
you only have one friend, invite your one friend and say to her, do you have one friend, even if it's an acquaintance? And the
Hmm.
three of us can go out to get coffee. And the intention, I want you to state the intention though. This is part of it, right? This is
Mm.
that when you were saying, I like you,
I like you.
we're going to use the same intentionality, but we're going to say, because I really am trying to be intentional about building some new relationships in my life, and I'd love to meet you and another friend of yours. Like, just lay it on the table
Yeah.
and make it clear, right? That's a clear signal. So even if you only
Hmm.
know one person, that is a place to start. So I
Mm.
knew that we needed a year, because otherwise, especially being a clinical therapist, I was like, I know that people make commitments to themselves and then don't follow through. I
Mm.
mean, it
Hmm.
just happens. And there's no
Hmm.
judgment of it. It's just, it happens.
Yeah.
And that was a very wise choice, because even in my own group, at about the 6-month mark, there were some of us that were kind of like, this is great. And when is it going to really gel?
Mm.
And so that was 6 months in.
Okay. Yeah.
So I based the year off of my own experience after it was over and looking back on
Ah.
it. And our group got together after we had been gathering for a year, and we had, I mean, this is what happens when your friend is a therapist, right? We got together to debrief on the year. And it was really intentional. And I had a whole bunch of questions that I had everybody answer at home. And we all brought our
Nice.
answers. And we really talked shop about our experience in this friendship group for the year. And there was a shared experience of it took some time.
Yeah.
And at about the 9-month mark was when a lot of people really felt something shift. And all of a sudden they were like, whoa, I am a part of something. I belong
Wow.
here. So that's a long
Mm.
time. It
Yeah.
felt good along the way, but
Hmm.
that deeper shift took longer. And so when I was creating the invitation, I had several people, business people and all that stuff, say, well,
Hmm.
I think you should have a 3-month option and a 6-month option. And I said, absolutely not. I'm
No.
going to
Yeah.
give this gift to people in the structure of this program that is not an option for them because
Hmm.
that will sabotage this thing before it even gets started.
Hmm. Absolutely. I think that's fabulous. Tell us some more stories of transformations for some of those women in there already. And then I guess talk us through like how, because you're saying like the invitation, people can join now all over the world, but
Mhm.
it's different. It's not something that they're joining your group or anything like that. So tell us about that first, I guess, and then the transformations.
Yeah. So again, that mechanical part that I was struggling so much to figure out was that I lead women's circles in Boulder, Colorado, where I live. They're monthly. I also lead a lot of other gatherings, tea ceremonies, vision boarding events, mandala. I partnered with a flower farm and I led a mandala, a nature mandala experience. So a lot of mindfulness based gatherings that are community based. So they're pretty affordable and open to anyone. So
Mm,
based on all of that experience, the discussion topics that I bring to those kinds of events, I was interested in something that could anchor this group. Like, what's the intent? Like, we all know we want friends. We all know we want to try to build a community. But what's the thing that's going to center our gathering? And that was some kind of rich discussion each month.
mm,
So I can't lead those all around the world. There's
mm,
only one me. And that was the dilemma I kept coming up against. I was like, well, I can't lead multiple groups. There just isn't enough of me, right?
mm,
So
mm,
finally I thought, oh, but what I can do is share all this rich content, the discussion prompts, and a little facilitation guide on how to lead a rich discussion with a group
mm-hmm.
and send that to everyone at the beginning of each month.
That's fabulous.
So no matter where you live, you can choose to join this program. I give you lots of help and support and guidance on how to invite people into your group, how to
Mm,
deal with rejection, because that is an inevitable part of taking risks on new relationships. And once you have a group of up to 8 people, the groups, there's a lot of autonomy, right? You could decide when you meet and, you're going to do whose house is the next gathering going to be held in, et cetera. Are you going to do food or no food? All of those decisions are very flexible. And I don't manage any of
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm just giving the container
Yeah.
and the structure for people to then sort of create what they want inside. Um,
Mm, that's
so
beautiful.
that's how the program can expand beyond just this little community things that I'm doing in Boulder, Colorado.
It's fabulous. It's so great because if any other way you do it, you're getting going against the research also. It's just like it's got to be that proximity and it's in, even so yeah, it could get to a point within like a digital setting like that it could be really helpful for some people, but I've had this dilemma a lot in my practice of like how do we, because my clients are all over the world actually, and so I'm like how do I, all these people are having very similar experiences and I want them all together, and digital is my only option there. But I think what's better than connecting people, uh, especially my audience right now, like instead of connecting on like just the illness and like the challenges with, I mean, obviously that's supportive to have a partner that someone you can relate to, because not everyone can relate to being ill and trying to do things, changing your lifestyle and nutrition, um, that much. So, but What's even better is doing this in your own community because it's not centered around being sick, and it's creating more of like a wellness of like a full body wellness, like mind, spiritual, like social. Like there's so many other aspects to us than just our health, and our health, those aspects build our health, right? So if friendship was treated as a core pillar, and if loneliness was treated as like a core pillar of health, like what would our nutrition, our sleep, like all of these different symptoms we might be dealing with, what would that actually do culturally and societally for us and personally for our health? That's what
So much, so
so
much.
much.
Are you familiar with the Harvard study?
Um, I I don't know. Tell us.
Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
The Harvard study started in 19, I think I'm getting the year right, 1937.
Mm-hmm.
It is the longest running, this is a mouthful, by the way. It's the longest running longitudinal health study in the world.
Wow. It's like,
And yeah, so it has
yeah.
been studying the same people and then their descendants since 1937.
Mm-hmm.
And the Harvard researchers, professors in 1937, the reason they devised the study was because at the time, Harvard, well, it still is, was based in a community that was quite impoverished. And so there was this dichotomy of people who could afford to go to Harvard University
Mm-hmm.
uh, within, though, this community of extreme poverty. And there were a few of the members of that community that were able to, through grants, et cetera, and scholarships, attend the university. So the question became, so all of these people from different socioeconomic places in life are now having an equalizing experience of getting a Harvard education.
Right.
What will their health outcomes be from here on out?
Mm. Wow.
So fascinating. I mean, I get chills when I talk about this. There's a great book called The Good Life that
Mm.
actually summarizes all the data from 1937 till about 4 or 5 years ago when that book was published, if you are super interested in this topic. And it is such a great book. But the results of that study that came out years ago and continue to be validated as they continue to this research is that
Mm-hmm.
the number one predictor of two things: lifespan, but quality of life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like the lifespan piece, people get so obsessed, and this is in your world, right? The
Mm-hmm.
nutrition world and the physical health world and all of that stuff.
Optimal health. Yeah.
Oh my
Or
gosh. I'm like,
longevity health, right? Yeah.
yes. And I'm like,
I'm,
can we talk about the quality of your life?
mm-hmm.
And happiness is such a buzzword, right? But
Yeah.
it was the quality of your relationships. That was the number one predictor. It wasn't what socioeconomic status you came from. It wasn't how much money you made in your career post Harvard.
Yeah.
It was the quality of your relationships and continues to be. So
Mm.
that point you were just making is it's
Mm.
absolutely correct that uh,
Mm-hmm.
creating a healthy and robust social foundation truly is it is the foundation
It
from
is.
all of these other aspects of our life.
Yes. 100%. Yes. Can you, yeah, let's go back to any one
Stories.
story of, or a couple stories of people's, I guess, outcomes. Like, what are the like transformations that people experience?
Mhm. One of my favorite stories from my personal friendship group, which by the way, we are now in year 4.
Oh, wow.
Yes,
That's amazing.
we still meet once a month officially,
Wow.
but we see each other all the time.
Mm,
And one thing that I really like to emphasize, and part of the why I'm so excited about offering this program, the invitation out to the world, is because I so desperately want other women to have what we're now a group of 8, what the
mm,
8 of us have. It has been life changing for every single one of us and for different reasons and in different ways, which I think is really important to note also. But we want to be in this and we all participate equally. And
mm,
that is such an interesting part of it as well. Because I really was the ringleader in the beginning. I was the cruise director. I was doing all the heavy lifting. And when I created the invitation, I thought this actually isn't going to work. Like women need to, because of the burden we were talking about earlier, women need to be able to start the group, if you're a comfortable initiator, we're going to harness that comfortability that you have in initiating and forming groups. But
Yeah.
once your group is formed, I want those initiators to get to take a break.
Yeah.
So the group is then carried, by everyone.
Yeah.
But one of my favorite stories was I invited one of my closest friends, and she is a go-getter. She's the director of a nonprofit organization. She is like all things to everyone and just warm and affectionate and just this beautiful human. So of course I invited her, and she said yes. And when we did our 1 year reflection on the program, or not the program, but on our friendship group, she offered something that really, really got my attention. She said, I did not know I needed this group.
Oh.
And I was like, you got to tell me more. What does that mean? And what she said was, I did have connections. I did see people. I did go, she's married. I had double dates with
Mm.
my husband, and I was doing things with people, but I did not have deep intimacy
No.
with many people in this town.
That's special. Wow.
Right.
That's huge.
And so that to me is really, to me, that's it. That feels like it's a lot of people's stories. I
Hmm.
have some friends, I have some connections. I'm not in that complete, some people are really lonely and are very sad and maybe even depressed, right? She wasn't in that camp, but she was in the camp of I have connections, but I didn't realize that they were mostly surface.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it wasn't until she experienced depth of connection and the consistency and the regularity with the same people that she was able to say, oh, I didn't even know that I needed this, but that was missing from my life. And from such a like talented, gifted, intelligent, like I just love that that came from her. I have so
Yeah.
much respect from her for her.
Yeah.
And that story speaks volumes to why the year is necessary, why the
Yeah.
regularity is necessary, why the intentionality is necessary.
Yeah. Yeah, it is shocking to hear from like this. You have this image of someone who's so successful and you just think, "Oh yeah, they've got it all. They've got the intimacy, all of the, they're just sometimes I look at people who are very social butterfly like it where it seems like it comes naturally to them and I'm like, "Oh, they probably like they're best friends with everybody." It seems like, but it's not always the case, and there's um, topics. It sounds like the topics that are focused on or curated for the invitation groups that you give and provide are also probably based in research to help with giving the substance to
Right.
create more depth too. Um, because sometimes it is like I want it's not just like the I think people have these stories that we tell about like certain personalities you just can't go deep with, or it takes, some people are just not vulnerable enough or whatnot. But I think what I hear from you is that it's really more about just creating the structure and the environment and like you let the magic work. And like if people do show, I mean, there is an element of like commitment and you do have to show up.
Mm.
But the length of that time and consistency, it's going to happen if you just let it. And you don't have to force the vulnerability or the connection, or like it's not as we don't have to put it on like in a fast, replay of like trying to make this faster than it needs to go either. So there's not a lot of pressure for people. It's just like just show up. There's topics, there's substance, um and so, so much more interest, and that continues to grow. Is that also what you've seen?
Absolutely. And I'm just like smiling warmly at you right now because I'm
Mm.
I'm thinking everything you're saying is so true. And I actually held a women's circle in Boulder last night.
Mm.
And there was a really, normally there are 8 of us, or 9, including me. Last night there were just 4 women because it's a drop in. I never know who's going to show up. I never know what their age is going to be, what their background. People find me like they do Google searches and show up,
Mm.
right? So, and that's what
Mhm.
I wanted. I wanted it to be a true community space. And last night, it was so because we were a smaller group, we had a little more time for our discussion, and there was such a shared experience of values, which was interesting because it's a random group of women. So that was sort of happenstance. But of course, a shared experience just broadly, like we were all sort of in something. It wasn't the same thing, but we were all in something that we had to overcome, this complicated thing we had to deal with. And as we're all sharing that, everyone just feels a sense of connection and not
Mm,
being alone, right? There are other
mm,
boats around me. And
yeah.
not only are there other boats around me, but we're actually talking and communicating. We're like close enough to hear each other and see each other and
Mm,
talk and connect. And it was a room of strangers. And that actually became the topic last night was
wow.
this is so amazing. Like I
Hmm.
didn't bring this up, but one of the participants did. And she was like, it is so amazing to feel the way I feel right now. And I don't know any of you. Of course, I get I get just like joyful and warm
Hmm.
and excited and just a million emotions at one time because that's all I want
Yeah.
is for more of us to feel that way. And so when
Hmm.
it's happening in my presence, I get so filled up. And so, Natalie, imagine that is a group of women who don't know each other.
Hmm.
Imagine the power of the same kind of discussions that are intimate, but not we're not going for we're not doing trauma processing. We're
Life
not
stories.
no, I mean, that is one thing when people hear intimacy and they hear vulnerability, a lot of us go to this extreme.
Yeah.
And that is not what this is about. That is, I think there's a new term called like trauma bonding,
Mm.
and that is not
Yes.
what this is about. This is about a much more, um, like a much healthier codependence. Like, oh, we
Mm.
are in a shared human experience, and I can
Yeah.
relate to you, and you can give me thoughts, and I can give you thoughts. It's not in that sort of barfing up,
Yeah.
all of our skeletons and all that kind of stuff. That's not what this is based on. But what I love is that what the conversation melded into like this very present process that was happening in the room of like, I can't believe I feel this amazing and I don't know any of you.
Yeah.
It just when you imagine that that is the content that's going to be shared every month for a year with
Hmm.
women who do begin to know each other, who
Hmm.
do begin to have a deep, care for one another past like, like because they're building
Yes.
friendships,
Yeah.
then yes, it is intimate and it is faster than we do it naturally. But it's
Hmm.
to your point that I loved that you made, it's not forced. It feels
Hmm.
so organic.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's like I've given people sort of like a rope to be lowered down slowly into the pool instead of just jumping into the deep end of the pool. It's like
It's a
there's sort
great
of this
analogy.
hand-holding and guided process, but it feels
Hmm.
really organic. And it
Yeah.
because a lot of times the research backs this up, and I think a lot of us can just agree with this anecdotally in our own lives, is that when you don't see people regularly enough, when you do see them, you end up spending a huge chunk of the time just catching up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that work project went south, and oh my gosh, my dog has been sick. And it's sort of, I mean, there are things that matter,
Yeah.
but are you sharing your values? Are you
Right.
sharing your deep beliefs? Are you sharing your stories? Are you sharing about what your, experiences with female identity have been?
Mm,
No,
yeah. Yeah.
not getting to the goodies, right?
Yeah. There's something about that too. It feels very like it's like a weird narrative of it's like you're not going through it with the person. It's just like I'm just going to narrate what the last 6 months was like for me, or like even like a month. Sometimes it's like
Mhm.
there's a lot that happened in a month. First that you might want to, that was like big for you internally. And so instead of like reflecting on it, and it's like, oh, now I'm here, it, that just feels tiring to kind of like catch people up and in and of itself. But being, I mean, being in it with people like that, people, yeah, you can share it in the moment, and those realizations just stick better. And the connection with the person, it sticks. Like when people tell me stories that they're going through versus this is what happened, I'm like, I kind of forget what they're going through even. um I love that. That's really, really awesome. Really, such an amazing evolution to solve this problem for so many. And like I can think of so many of my clients who I think that loneliness element is a huge part of their nervous system being so out of whack a little bit imbalanced. And
Right.
that's not their fault. It's, but we have to work a little harder to put ourselves out there.
Mhm.
And it's definitely scary for a lot of my clients who are dealing with so many health issues. Like there's so many symptoms that come up. It's like kind of challenging to show up all the time. But I think that what I think I want some of like our listeners to like listen or like gather from this is just a small, like what's a small shift that they could make this month to create some of the regularity or proximity, intentionality into their just normal day to day. But also, how can women learn about the invitation if they want to start something like this? Because I think some people would very much want to get that going in their community and start to invite that one person, because
Right.
if, yeah, and then have it just evolve from there. You don't have to have it all figured out
No.
at all. And I definitely believe in like the power of just the magic of this intention, like setting an intention to connect with more people and putting that out there, like it will come
Right.
for
Right.
people. And that just is that kind of safety is what our nervous system is really needing more and more. Like there's all, yeah, nervous system dysregulation is such a buzzword now. And like, yes, everybody needs it, the regulation piece, not the
Right.
dysregulation.
Yes. No, we don't need more of that. The best way is for people just to go to my website, which is heatherjcarlson.com. And then, of
Awesome.
course, you can see the section on the invitation.
Hmm.
And the other thing I've done, Natalie, is I'm offering free 1.5 hour women's gatherings that are they're modeled exactly after the women's circles that I host in Boulder and also the structure of the invitation.
Hmm.
And so instead of me like telling people about the program, they can just come and experience it with me. And I
Awesome.
have made this free. It is
Awesome.
a standalone event, which means I do talk about the program because people are there to hear about it. But of the hour and a half, I talk about the program for about 7 minutes. And the
Hmm.
rest of it is a really rich conversation, much like you and I have had about the challenges of modern friendship, what we can do about it. And then actually people have a discussion. They get to be in group with one another, talk about the challenges, the way they've been impacted by them.
Hmm.
And we close in the ones in person, we close in candlelight, just like I always do in my own
Hmm.
circles. And just like the women of the invitation, they get a welcome kit, which includes like candles to do their own closings with that are really meaningful and an intentional way to close our time together.
Good.
So it's a
Good.
great taste of the program. And I've
Hmm.
made it free just because I want it to be accessible. I want as many people as possible to hear more about what we've talked about today, because I think a lot of what we've talked
Fabulous.
about isn't understood or isn't shared in sort of one
Hmm.
space. It's all these different messages, and I want to have it all be shared in one space. So
Hmm.
you can register, people can register for virtual events on my website. And of
Fabulous.
course, the in-person ones are only available to people who live in the Denver
Boulder.
metro area. But I
Yes.
am doing those virtually, and it's really fun because people show up from all different states and all walks of life. And we have a really lovely gathering together, and people can learn about the program there too.
That's wonderful. I love it. I'm gonna have to join and visit one of those groups too. And I actually a couple of years ago had set an intention. I wanted to start like a book club or something, a women's group after reading Women Who Run with the Wolves. And just, I don't know, just I'm inspired by women in my life, and
Yes.
we all need more of that gathering. It's such an ancient tradition. I think that we need to a ritual, and like it sounds like there's that element at the end. You've created this facilitated structure that is really safe and really meaningful. So that's beautiful, yeah, and replicable and so yeah, I guess the last we'll finish, I guess. So definitely gonna go link the links that you shared. And then if there's a last question that you actually want to leave with our audience to ponder for this week, we'll end it there.
Yes, I do have a question for them to ponder, and it's the inverse of what I think is often put out to people sort of in the social media world to ponder. A lot of times we're encouraged to think about what kind of friends we want. So, what are
Mm.
the qualities in others that we want? And I'm going to flip that on its head. And I'm going to ask your listeners instead to think about what are the qualities that they bring to their friendships.
Wow.
What is their, their essence, their authentic self? What are the quirkiness, right? Maybe it's like the thing that they nerd out on. Maybe it's
Mm.
their curiousness. Maybe it's their compassion. Maybe it's their patience, right? I mean, we bring so many different qualities to our friendships. There are so many different reasons why people choose us or
Mm.
have chosen us throughout our lifetimes. And I think we don't often do sort of an evaluation of what we are bringing to others because we are a friend to someone else, right? So much of the conversation is based on the friends that we
Yeah.
want or that are ours, the sort of
Hmm.
possessive term, right? And I like the idea of flipping that on its head and thinking about how it feels for someone else to be your friend.
That's an awesome question. Yeah, that's exactly where it starts, you guys. And I'm so grateful for this conversation. I was just thinking about like we were talking right before we started. It was just like the synchronicity of the themes and topics that I like calling in and just you reaching out and my husband. And so it's just really great to connect again and on this level and just be be with each other and like cultivate more connection with people because that is the biggest thing lacking in our modern existence right now and it can help so much. So thank you. Thank
Mhm.
you again.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome.